So now we will transition to our presenters from San Francisco State University. Today we are joined by Kimberly Altura, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Education, and Dr. Lori Beth Way, Vice Provost of Academic Planning and Dean of Undergraduate Education. And again, you can read their bios if you click on the link in the chat. So please welcome Kim and Lori Beth. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see so many of you who I've seen at previous meetings and also see lots of new faces as well. If you wouldn't mind, I asked at the very beginning, but I know a lot of people came in after that. If you wouldn't mind putting your campus after your name, it's great for us to be able to see the different folks who are here. I would super appreciate that. So as she mentioned, my name is Lori Beth Way. We're going to talk today about how we've made some very major structural changes and kind of service changes at San Francisco State. I thought it was really useful that our previous presenters talked about kind of when this all started for them. So I'll just say that I joined San Francisco State in 2015, like right before the last student success, plan was 2025, GI 2025 was launched. So if you can think about that as the kind of timing of where we are. So Kim, if you want to go to the next slide. So right before the initial, the very just last pass, GI 2025, this is what advising looked like at San Francisco State. So students could get GE advising from multiple different offices. They could get it from their college advisors. They could get it from our undergraduate advising center. They might get it from EOP if they're an EOP student. They would get GE advising in a lot of different places. But the professional advisors in none of those places really advised on the major requirements. Those were left exclusively to the faculty to do. So then you had to find your faculty or department to talk about your major advising. This is the old model. So Kim, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about challenges for students, which these challenges will be very familiar to probably most of you. Probably the biggest challenge was you had to play a game of 50 questions to get students to the right advising location on campus because we had duplication of services across the campus. Did the student need GE advising or were they looking for major advising? They could either go to the undergraduate advising center or their college resource center for that. Were they an EOP student, which meant they could see their EOP advisor, but they also could see an advisor in the undergraduate advising center or in the college resource center. So it was a very complex flow chart to get students to the right location. So that was one challenge definitely for students. And then duplication of services was another challenge, just because they would know they could get the same thing at different places. So what would be the right location? And then sometimes there was a lack of consistency around what was being provided from center to center, even in terms of like, what were the hours of operation? Were they open at lunchtime? Could the student see an advisor for drop-in advising or was it only appointment-based? So a lot of confusion and challenges for students around that. And then in addition to that, there were a lot of challenges for our academic advisors working in the center. So I first want to start with saying that all the advisors were kind and caring and really wanting to do a great job out in those centers, but oftentimes they were short-staffed. So depending on how much an individual college had invested in advising as a resource, we might see advising ratios before we made some of these changes as high as 1900 to 1. So really high, and then sometimes very small. If the college was really small, you might see a ratio of 150 to 1. The training and development across the campus was different. So some advisors didn't get any kind of formalized structured training when they came on board. Some advisors didn't have ongoing training. Some centers had great, very strong training going on. We found that information wasn't getting directly to the advisors. So if we made changes to policies or procedures or curriculum, sometimes the advisors weren't aware of it. In some centers, advisors were being asked to do a lot of administrative work. So like awarding scholarships for the college or doing a lot of paperwork. So things that weren't sort of direct service to students. We found that in some centers that was happening. The office spaces, some were great, some were really bad. Like some were very tiny spaces, crowded, no privacy, run down. And again, it varied a lot depending if the individual college had spaces that were accessible and if they had spent money to maybe renovate the spaces over time. So a lot of variation in terms of the college resource centers and what they were like. And then the limited scope. So most of the college centers, except for the College of Business, where they did do some major advising there, most of them were only doing general education advising. And so advisors would sort of get through the student's degree progress report, get to the place where they hit the major, and they would say, oh, I need to refer you to your faculty advisor, which, that seamless transition sometimes didn't really take place for the students. Students were frustrated that they had to go somewhere else to get that next part answered. And advisors felt a little bit like their hands were tied. They couldn't really answer questions about major, minor, because that was the scope of the faculty. All of that, of course, resulted in higher turnover with academic advisors, just for all of these reasons. And then also at the same time, the job market in the San Francisco Bay Area was pretty hot. So, we had a lot of advisors leaving for advising positions at other campuses. I think at the time, Stanford was hiring like 70 advising positions. So we kept losing advisors to Stanford, but also just losing advisors out of the profession to, better paying jobs in the Bay Area. So I'm going to pass it back over to Lori Beth.
So as I said, we first did a kind of lots of major changes with the GI 2025. I'm sure you will say, because I would have, if I were you, how the heck did you hire 23 new advising positions? This was part of our investing in people. Some of it came from earmarked GI 2025 money, and some of it came from the Stupsky Foundation, where they helped us kind of implement a holistic advising model. So we hired a bunch of advisors that we needed. We basically created a training that all professional advisors had to go through. We had a support from our previous provost. She was previously in my role as Dean of Undergraduate Education. And then when she became provost, she really, made it clear to everyone that the advisors had to be trained by our central person. So we started that. Some of the structure that we had in terms of shared advising was some of the folks we hired were these, graduation specialists, and they were shared. So that means they worked half the time in our central office, they worked half the time in the college office. We implemented EAB Navigate to try and improve communication. And then we finally, because we kept trying to make changes, right? We did all these things in increments. We did ultimately have the provost kind of write this memo that outlined some standardization, because still people were reporting out to different college deans. And so she said, okay, everybody does have to be open at lunchtime. Everybody does have to have those hours. Each advising center everybody needs to have drop-in hours. Everyone needs to have scheduled appointments. So we tried to also create these changes by still not centralizing everything yet. This was kind of our in-between. So if we go to the next slide, Kim can tell us our next step.
There we go. Okay, so that time period when we were doing that, it probably started around 2016, and we went all the way up until 2020, kind of iterating over time, making these small improvements. In 2020, with the help of the Stupsky Family Foundation, where we hired a bunch of advisors, we moved to a caseload model for our first-time freshmen. So we were really having a challenge with retention in our first 2 years, and we wanted to put more resources into supporting students more holistically through that first year. So we decided to move to this caseload advising approach. Our goal was to try to get to 300 to 1 as our ratio. And we got pretty close. I think we were like maybe 330 to 1. And so we had all first-time freshmen assigned to an advisor in our undergraduate advising center. We then moved the undergraduate advising center to only work with the first-time freshmen and undeclared students. And our college resource centers would then take on the second year through graduation and be doing general education advising for those students. So we did that for a few years. And then after that, we were also renovating our space. So it was going to be this new, beautiful space for all the first-time freshmen. So basically a center for just the first-time freshmen. And in the midst of the pandemic, we kind of shifted gears with the help of leadership. The president actually met with Lori Beth and I and said, hey, we're seeing some good results with this caseload model, first-time freshmen, retention is improving. What can we do that's more drastic? Something, we want to do something bigger, faster. And so we really wanted to move to this one-stop shop for advising. But we knew to be able to do that, we really needed a space that would accommodate everyone. So, this was one sort of silver lining of the pandemic, because it allowed us to, most people were already working remote. It allowed us to move to this one-stop shop. When we opened the center, instead of it just being a freshman center, it was the center for the whole campus. And advisors share offices, so they're on a rotating schedule where they're not in the same office in the same day. They come in and alternate their space. Um, all the advisors working in academic affairs in spring of 2023 moved to the Division of Undergraduate Education and Academic Planning, which is our division. And we closed all the college advising centers and we reopened the center as a one-stop location for students. So if you were a freshman, you went to the freshman advising team in the undergraduate advising center. And if you were a student in your second year through graduation, you came to the same location, but you met with an advisor on our college advising team. And then we took a further step that fall and moved to whole degree advising. So in fall 2023, we case loaded our first and second year students. So instead of just doing it for the first year, they now had an assigned advisor for the first 2 years. If they had an EOP advisor, they were singularly assigned to the EOP advisor. We didn't duplicate advisor assignments. And then our college advising teams moved to advise students from their third year through graduation. And we took on whole degree advising. So we started advising on the major, the minor, the certificate, as well as general education. We did this in partnership with the faculty. So we didn't stop having faculty advising. We just had faculty working on more complex advising questions. So the general university staff advisors could answer questions about what class should I take next? But if it got more complicated, hey, can I substitute this class for this? Can I get an exception for this? We would be referring to faculty advisors. And faculty also continue to do, research, mentorship, internships, career planning, post-graduation planning with students. So we really wanted to have that be a strong pipeline of like the students could come to the undergraduate advising center, get that initial help, and then get the referrals out to the faculty advisors. So we've been doing that now since fall 2023, and really in the last couple of years have been digging in more to strengthen that partnership, make sure that we're really clarifying the role of what a staff advisor can do, what a faculty advisor can do, and making sure we're all on the same page with some of the curricular changes that are coming. There's been some really positive aspects to this. So it's so much easier now when a student says, I need advising. All you have to ask them are you an EOP student? And if they're an EOP student, you send them to EOP. If they're not an EOP student, you send them to the Undergraduate Advising Center. So, I mean, it's much, much simpler for students. There's that streamlined support. The advisors can answer questions about all parts of the degree. They don't feel like their hands are tied and they can only answer certain questions. It has enabled us to be more holistic and proactive in our approach. So, especially in those first 2 years where they have an assigned academic advisor, we have what we call campaign calendars. If you're an EAB campus, you're probably very familiar with that term. And the advisors aren't just reaching out about things like helping you with class registration, they're also nudging students in other ways as well, and really serve as kind of a concierge for the students in their first 2 years to make sure they get connected to resources and support and get engaged on campus. It's definitely allowed us to be more flexible with hiring. So we've had some enrollment declines as well, similar to Sonoma State. And now whenever we have an opening that comes up in advising, we always are looking at our ratios across our college advising teams and thinking about, do we really need the advisor in, for instance, liberal and creative arts, or do we need an additional advisor in our College of Science and Engineering team? So it's allowed us to be a little bit more flexible in thinking about where we need our advising staff. I'll tell you that the college that had the highest ratio before we made these changes was the College of Science and Engineering. It's also where we have the most students. And they were at one point at 1900 to 1. I had mentioned that before. And now we've been able to keep their ratio closer to about 500 to 1, which is much, much better than it was. So that's really been helpful to be a little bit more nimble in that way. We also have opportunities because we have SSP2 positions, which are our graduation specialists. Then we have our academic counselor positions, which are SSP3s. And we have some SSP4s as well that help with coordination in the center. So there's been some opportunities for staff to stick around and move up within the center when someone leaves. That's been really great to see that happen as well. And it's created definitely less turnover than in the past. Because our division is, we house academic advising within the Division of Undergraduate Education and Academic Planning. So a lot of the curricular changes are going through the other arm of our division. So it's really helpful to have those two things together, where we're hearing about the curricular changes that are coming and able to sort of make sure the advisors are abreast of what's coming next. So that's been a good thing too. And then finally, we have some positive data to share. Our first year full-time retention rates have been up between 83 and 85% for the last 5 years. So that's been an improvement for us, which is really great. And we always survey our students who come to advising, and 92% of the students say that their advisor is knowledgeable. And we have other, data points as well that we're looking at, but definitely positive changes for students. And Lori Beth?
Yes, I am watching time. I know we have about 2 minutes, and I think I can do it. So a lot of what folks ask us once they see this, and I even actually got a text while we're talking, was like, okay, but how? Like this is a model that a lot of folks want to do, but how did you actually get there? And so just briefly, how we got here, as Kim mentioned, the president and the provost were like, we're going to do this. They didn't say it in the sense of the details. They simply said, we're going to have an advising center where all students can go to get advised on all parts of the degree, right? So not everybody, all the faculty, everybody understood exactly what that meant. It was like details to come. But it came from both of them first. And then we had a lot of transition steps. We basically announced it right at the beginning at our convocation, our like all faculty and staff day, the very beginning of the year, and said we're going to work through making this transition over the year. And then as Kim mentioned, then the following fall, we made it. So we had many, many meetings with faculty. There were some faculty who loved this idea and were like, great, I see academic advising as a checkbox, please do it for me. And there were other folks who were like, absolutely, over my dead body, I want to be the only one talking to our students, don't do it. And we had to work with both of those sides. And we also we included a faculty leadership to help us in this transition. So we had somebody who was previously the academic senate chair work with us as the faculty director advising. So, I was taking her with me to meetings and Kim was taking her with me. And it's sometimes easier for faculty to hear from other faculty about why this is a good idea. We also, this faculty advising squares, we actually paid the faculty to meet over a semester to come up with kind of advising one sheets, which are things that they could tell us, this is what we think you should be telling to your students when they come. So they felt some ownership over being able to give us, the professional advisors, guidance about what they would recommend. And then I would say this, I do think it was really important to clearly articulate why we were doing this. We put the students at the front all the time. We did use data, as Sonoma talked about, was really important. We showed the data of why this would be good. We referenced literature, kind of like as the same way this panel started, of like, hey, these are the best practices, and this is why we're doing this. And then we built in structure for ongoing feedback. So if you go to the next slide, in terms of how we sustain this, the ongoing feedback includes advising councils. So each college has faculty advising councils, and our professional leadership meets with them, and our faculty director of advising meets with them at least once a semester. We also meet monthly with the associate deans. We had a great partnership with EOP. And then, so it's in terms of creating infrastructure, I do think having a director of faculty advising is a good idea. It's not expensive. It's just a little bit of assigned time. And then we have UAC college liaisons. So every department has a faculty liaison to the UAC. So if they have a concern, they know who's going to talk to it, what faculty member in that department, and they can go to talk to the USC directly. I talked about the advising one-pagers. And then we've really been able to provide, I think, a lot more support for our advisors than we had in the past, and giving them resources, training. When we started all this, nobody ever got to go to conferences. Now there's, lately that we haven't been able to do it, but generally over this time period, we've been able to provide much more professional development. And I think in terms of what's next, this is 1 minute. What we really want to do next, and was talked about a little bit in the last presentation, is to make our connection with career. They are a different office, but we're working right now on a grant that would actually help us make more of a connection with them and work more clearly with them. We're also working with our faculty to help more around career. All of this, to Dewan's question, is very much focused on the New Student Success Network and trying to integrate career more into all those things. We're using the AI feature of EAB, and then we continue to refine our outreach efforts in the kind of strategic area that was talked about earlier. So I'll stop there.
So this is for all our attendees. What is one idea, practice, or strategy that you're taking away from today's presentation that you would like to see implemented on your campus? And what challenge or need would it address? So go ahead and put your responses to those questions in the chat, even if it's just a response to the first question. Okay, someone mentioned the major maps. I'm really curious about that as well. Nakata's career foundations training, a centralized advising model, with all advisors receiving the same training. Yes, that's so crucial. Cross training with our career services, NACE, and major maps to coincide with our Welcome Back campaign through EAB. Integration of career services. Working on the advisor to student ratio to address workload issues. More sophisticated data use, better assessment of service provision, meeting student needs. Thank you. So go ahead and continue to put that into the chat. And next slide, please. So we wanted to leave you with some questions for further reflection, whether it's you reflecting on them, you taking it back to your team on your campus. So we have 4 questions here. The first one, do we have a vision for holistic advising, right? Doing some level settings. See if we're all on the right page, on the same page. If so, what is our vision and to what extent is it shared across campus? If not, what do we need to do to develop one? The second, what tools and shared practices do we need to make data a consistent, integrated part of advising across campus? 3, how effectively are we aligning our advising practices across campus to provide holistic support for students rather than fragmented or siloed experiences? What are the key gaps in coordination and collaboration across the student life cycle? And then finally, how are we communicating changes to advising to advisors, students, and campus partners in ways that build understanding and openness to a new approach, right? This is a change management piece that the San Francisco team shared with us. Next slide, please. So thank you again for joining us over the next academic year. We really hope to continue these conversations on advising. So today's event, it served as an opportunity to learn from one another and to information gather so that we can scaffold the learning for an eventual in-person gathering. So having said that, an evaluation is coming your way where we'll ask you, what would you like to discuss or learn about at a future session on advising? So thank you again for joining us. We encourage you to check out our Knowledge Center where you can read more about our applied research. We have some work, some publications on advising as well. And you can browse our blogs, our memos, our briefs. And please stay in touch with us and engage with us online. Next slide. And this is how you can continue to reach out to us. So thank you to the network and Ed Insight staff for all the work that you did to make this session happen. Thank you to Melinda. Thank you to our presenters, to Shannon and CCE for all the technical support. And I hope that we can continue to stay in touch and be a resource for you. Thanks so much.